At her friend's engagement party, she whispered, "That should have been us if you were richer." I just smiled. A year later, I walked into the same venue with a ring for someone who actually believed in me. We were at an engagement party for my girlfriend's best friend, Jessica. The venue was one of those ridiculously expensive old mansions that get rented out for events, with crystal chandeliers and waiters in tuxedos. My girlfriend, Veronica, was in her element. I was just trying not to spill anything on my rented suit. I was a software developer, working for a small startup. I made decent money, enough to be comfortable, but I wasn't rich. Not by Veronica's standards anyway. For the 3 years we were together, my modest salary was a constant, low-grade source of disappointment for her. She never said it outright, but it was there in the sighs when we looked at houses online, or the way she'd talk about the European vacations her friends were taking. That night, Jessica was showing off her engagement ring. It was a monster. A huge diamond that probably cost more than my car. Veronica was staring at it with a kind of hungry look in her eyes. Later, while we were standing by the bar, she leaned in close to me. The smell of her expensive perfume was overpowering. "That should have been us if you were richer," she whispered. She didn't say it like a joke. She said it like she was talking about the weather, a simple, unchangeable fact. My 3 years of loyalty, of supporting her through her own career changes, of being the guy she called when her car broke down in the middle of the night, all of it was erased by that one sentence. It all came down to a number in my bank account. And my number wasn't high enough. I just smiled. I didn't argue, I didn't get defensive, I just nodded, like she had made a completely reasonable observation. Something inside me just clicked off. The part of me that had been trying so hard to be the man she wanted, it just gave up. In that moment, surrounded by all that wealth and expectation, I felt a strange kind of peace. I was done. We went home in near silence. The next morning, I woke up before she did and made a pot of coffee. When she came into the kitchen, yawning, I was sitting at the table with 2 empty boxes beside me. "What's with the boxes?" she asked. "You should probably start packing," I said. She stared at me, confused. "Packing for what?" "You're moving out," I said, my voice even. "Last night, you made it very clear I give you the life you want, so I'm letting you go find it." She actually laughed. "Are you serious? You're breaking up with me because of one little comment?" "It wasn't a little comment, Veronica," I said. "It was the truth. Your truth. You deserve to be with someone who can afford the rings you want. That person isn't me, so we're done." The look on her face when she realized I was serious was something I'll never forget. It wasn't sadness, it was annoyance. I had inconvenienced her. I had disrupted her 5-year plan without her permission. She moved out a week later, into a small apartment her parents helped her pay for. The breakup was surprisingly clean at first. We didn't have many shared assets. The apartment was my lease. The car was mine. We just split up the furniture we had bought together. The first escalation came about a month later. It was a social media campaign led by Jessica. Veronica had clearly spun a story where I was the villain. The narrative was that I was an insecure, jealous man who couldn't handle being with a successful woman who had ambitious friends. Jessica posted a picture of her and Veronica with a caption about how real friends support you when a weak man tries to hold you back. A few of our mutual friends took the bait. I got a couple of texts from people telling me I was a jerk for how I had treated her. I didn't respond to any of them. I just went quiet. Instead of fighting her on social media, I focused on my work. The little startup I worked for was a risk. We were a small team, working on a new piece of financial software that we thought could be a game changer. I had taken a lower salary in exchange for a significant amount of stock options. It was a gamble. Veronica had always called it my little computer project and had told me I should get a real job at a big, stable corporation. For the next 6 months, I did nothing but work. I was at the office 12, sometimes 15 hours a day. I poured everything I had into that software. My social life disappeared. I lost touch with the friends who had taken her side. It was a lonely, exhausting time. But every time I felt like giving up, I would just remember her whisper in that crowded room. And then, the gamble paid off. A huge multinational bank acquired our little startup. The deal was massive, and my stock options, the ones Veronica had mocked, were were suddenly worth a staggering amount of money. I'm not talking about buy a new car money. I'm talking about never have to work another day in your life money. I didn't change my life overnight. I stayed at the company through the transition as part of the deal. I bought a new truck, a nice one, but not a flashy sports car. I kept my apartment. The only person who knew the full extent of my new wealth was my financial advisor. And then I met someone. Her name was Hannah. She was a teacher at a local elementary school. We met at a dog park. My scruffy mutt started a wrestling match with her golden retriever. We started talking, and it was just easy. She didn't ask what I did for a living until our third date. When I told her I was a software developer, she just nodded. She was more interested in talking about a book she was reading. She was smart, funny, and kind. She didn't care about money. She cared about what kind of person you were. A year after I met Hannah, a year to the day of Jessica's engagement party, I decided it was time. The first step was the venue. I called the events manager at the same mansion where the party had been. I told her I wanted to book the entire estate for a private event on a specific Saturday night. I told her I was planning a surprise birthday party for my girlfriend. I paid the exorbitant fee without blinking. The next step was the guest list. I knew that Veronica and Jessica were still best friends. I also knew that Jessica and her now husband Tom still hung out with a lot of our old mutual friends. So I did something a little manipulative. I reached out to Tom, who was a decent guy who had always been caught in the middle of Jessica and Veronica's drama. I told him that I was throwing a huge, all-expenses-paid party for a bunch of my old friends to celebrate some recent success. I told him I wanted to bury the hatchet, that life was too short for bad blood. I invited him and Jessica, and I told him to invite everyone from our old friend group. I knew that if Jessica was invited, she would bring Veronica. It was a Trojan horse. The day of the party arrived. Hannah had no idea what was really happening. She thought we were just going to a fancy birthday dinner for one of my old colleagues. When we pulled up to the mansion, she was stunned. "This is for a colleague?" she asked, her eyes wide. "He's a very successful colleague," I said, smiling. We walked in and the place was packed. All the old faces were there. Jessica and Tom, all the friends who had ghosted me. And standing by the bar, holding a glass of champagne, was Veronica. She was with some new guy, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit. She saw me, and a slow, smug smile spread across her face. She saw me in my nice but not ridiculously expensive suit. She saw Hannah, in her simple but elegant dress. She saw the guy she had written off back in the same room where she had delivered her verdict. She thought she knew how the story went. She and Jessica made their way over to us. Well, Veronica said, looking me up and down. "Look what the cat dragged in. I'm surprised you could afford the cover charge here, Alex." Before I could respond, Jessica chimed in. "Be nice, V. He's trying. It's sweet that your new boss is letting you use his party to impress your new girlfriend." I just smiled. Something like that. I spent the next hour mingling. I talked to the old friends who had taken her side. I was polite, friendly. I didn't bring up the past. I let them all believe their own version of the story. The story where I was a struggling, bitter ex, and Veronica was the one who had escaped to a better life. And then, it was time for the main event. The catering staff brought out a huge birthday cake. The lights dimmed. I got up on the small stage where the band had been playing. "Thank you all for coming," I said into the microphone. "I know this is a surprise for some of you. A year ago, I was in this very room, and it was a difficult night for me. A lot has changed since then." I saw Veronica whisper something to Jessica, a smirk on her face. "I'm not a big speech guy," I continued, "but I wanted to get you all here to celebrate a new chapter in my life, and I wanted to do it here, in this room, to prove a point. A point to myself, that a year can change everything." I looked over at Hannah, who was watching me with a confused but happy expression. "Hannah," I said, and my voice cracked a little, "you walked into my life when I was at my lowest. You didn't see a struggling guy with a crazy idea. You saw me. You believed in me. You didn't care about the money I had or didn't have. You cared about the person I was." I walked over to her, got down on one knee, and pulled out a small velvet box. "This isn't a birthday party," I said, my voice shaking. "This is for you." I opened the box. Inside was a ring. A monster. A diamond that made Jessica's look like a grain of sand. The entire room gasped. "Hannah," I said, looking up at her tear-filled eyes, "will you marry me?" She just nodded, unable to speak, and I slid the ring onto her finger. The room erupted in applause. All of my old friends, the ones who had doubted me, were cheering. I stood up, kissed my fiancée, and then I looked across the room. I found Veronica. She was just standing there, her face a pale mask of shock. Her new, rich boyfriend was staring at the ring on Hannah's finger with his jaw hanging open. Jessica was looking back and forth between the ring and me, the pieces clicking into place in her head. Veronica understood. She understood that this whole night, this whole party wasn't for Hannah's birthday. It wasn't to celebrate my success. It was for her. It was a response, a year in the making, to her whisper at the bar. I had brought her back to the scene of the crime to show her, in front of everyone she knew, just how wrong she had been. The rest of the night was a blur of congratulations. Tom, Jessica's husband, came over and shook my hand, a look of genuine respect in his eyes. "Well played, man," he said. "Well played." Jessica and Veronica disappeared without saying goodbye. The fallout was quiet but devastating. I heard through the grapevine that Veronica and her new boyfriend had a massive fight on the way home. He was furious that she had so dramatically underestimated my financial situation. Their relationship, which was built on the shaky foundation of her upgrading from me, crumbled. They broke up a week later. Jessica sent me a long, rambling apology text a few days after the party. She said she had no idea that Veronica had twisted the story, that she was so sorry for how she had treated me. I just replied, "Okay." My wedding to Hannah was 6 months later. It was a small private affair, just our close friends and family. It wasn't in a big, fancy mansion. It was in the backyard of the beautiful new house we had bought together. The house I paid for in cash. The revenge wasn't the money. It wasn't the ring. It was the look on Veronica's face when she realized that the boring guy she had thrown away had built a life more beautiful, more successful, and more full of love than she could have ever imagined. She had judged me based on my bank account, and I had shown her that a man's real worth is something you can't put a price on.